these last days, it's been suggested that there's one last paradox that has to be resolved, reconciled, before we can experience and know what is called liberation, or to use my parlance, to live in a state of absence of illusion. But the stories of the last days have been with the possibility that we can know what this paradox is. But perhaps instead of examining what might be considered two that have to be brought together and reconciled, we should look at it like the other paradoxes, which are like two sides of a coin. And instead of examining one side or the other, look at that which is in the middle, which brings it together for us. There's no doubt that we all know that saying by some poet or learned pundit that says, "There is no force on earth greater than the power of an idea whose time has arrived." So there's that story of the great King Solomon, who was considered and deemed to be, and indeed thought of himself as the wisest man in the world. But one day he gathered all of the learned sages, pundits, soothsayers, scholars together, and after feasting them, putting on a great feast, he said to them, "I know a power that is greater than all the powers of creation." And they all laughed. But he said, "I can demonstrate this to you." And so they all again laughed. How was this possible? But in the following days, King Solomon gathered together those forces that he could conjure up with the powers that had come to him, like his magic carpet, and being able to call down the great birds of the sky, in particular the great white eagle. And garnering these forces together, he began to have a tower built. A tower built in some great place, almost deserted, but beside which there grew a magnificent oak tree. Now the tower was built almost as tall as this magnificent creature, this great oak tree. But then he called his very beloved daughter to him, Kaisha, and he said, "My beloved daughter, I am going to place you in this tower, but do not worry. Something will happen." But Kaisha cried because she imagined the loneliness, the solitude that would be there in that tower. But King Solomon reassured her, something will happen. So the time passed, and Kaisha, in her loneliness, in a tower in which there was only a single window, that window looking out, indeed, of course, at the great oak tree, its branches reaching up, almost touching the pane of the window that was the only outlook in her tower. And the time passed, and it so happened there was a very rich merchant who had an only son. Now that only son, somewhere within him was a great desire to sail the 7 seas. But his father had lost his beautiful young wife when a wave washed over the ship on which she was travelling, and she was lost. So he would not allow his son to go and embark on any kind of voyage. But the son begged and begged and begged until the day when he relented, and he said that he would allow him, his son, to indeed take a voyage. But he was afraid. There was much fear and trepidation at allowing this beloved son to embark on this journey. But before doing so, the merchant took out from his cloak a stone that had somehow a glow within it that did not need outside light in any way to illuminate what it had and was. And he gave this to his son, and he said, perhaps this will protect you on this voyage. Now the son did embark, but just as the merchant feared, a huge wave, a huge storm came, bringing a wave that washed him overboard. But before the wave took him, the old servant that had accompanied him tied with a leather thong the stone around his waist. And so when the young son was washed overboard and found himself washed up in a vast place unknown, he had a stone. And then as he cast around, being thirsty and hungry, he noticed that out of this wilderness there was the tower, and beside this tower was the great oak tree. Now, as he gazed upward, he espied in the window a vision which captured his attention. And he imagined, or was it imagination, the beauty of that which he glimpsed in that tall tower. But in him, he knew that he had to find a way to get to that tower. So remembering that he had this stone, he took it out of the pouch that was tied around his waist, and holding it, suddenly out of it emerged what seemed to be a great serpent. Was it a serpent? But whatever it appeared to be, it wound itself around the trunk of the tree and seemed to point itself right up to the very tip of that great tree, which had branched, reaching out to the window of this tower. And that seeming serpent had formed what was like a stairway, a stepping stone. And so the young man climbed, and indeed when he reached the topmost point of the oak tree, the branch reaching out was just firm enough for him to go across. How? To crawl, to reach. And there at the window was waiting the maiden, Kaisha. Of course, when they came together, it was an instant union. In that moment, there was no thought of a ceremony. There was just instant marriage. Now, over the coming days, King Solomon noticed that the great white eagle that every day brought the food, the delicacies from the palace, carrying them to Aisha in her tower, was taking a double portion of food. So he immediately conjured up his magic carpet and went to that place where he found Kaisha and the young man united, wed. And of course, this was broadcast abroad to all, with King Solomon stating, "Now you see that power which is greater than all the forces of creation have been demonstrated, is real." So we can ask ourselves, what is this force? What is it that has enabled us to reconcile the other paradoxes that arose in our life? The big ones, stillness and movement, being empty and being full. But it was not a power of mind. It was not an act of reconciliation that brought it about. Or was it? What say you? The middle of this coin, where what seemed to be two are one. What is this power? Greater than the powers of creation. What say you?